I want you to think of a four-letter word that would immediately offend a soil scientist if you say it to them. And I don't want you to think really deep. It's not that offensive. It's probably the word that most of you would use to describe the contents of this bag. That four-letter word is dirt. And I want to let you know that after my participation in the soil evaluation career development event, every time that I heard somebody call this bag dirt, I cringed inside. Because dirt is a bag of misplaced soil. You might be asking, what's the difference between dirt and soil? Well, I'll tell you that answer. According to the Soil Scientists Society of America, soil is a mixture of minerals, organisms, air, and water. While, according to the United States Department of Agriculture, dirt is a bag, or not a bag, but dirt is misplaced soil. So, you might tell me, Karson, isn't this soil in the bag misplaced? But to me, it's not, because I put it here for a particular reason, and that reason is to tell you about the importance of soil and how to identify its texture, color, models, and if there are any rocks in it, just like I learned my sophomore year in Ag Science 2. So first off, to start identifying the color of soil, you are going to get your soil sample out of the ground. So I did this in the back of Troy Buchanan High School in front of the Ag building. So be careful walking through the yard there. You might trip and fall because there's a little tiny hole, but it's not that noticeable. So there are different colors of soil that soil can be. There's dark brown, very dark brown, black. There's light brown and regular brown. And then soil can actually be gray or white. And gray and white soil identifies the water table of the soil, so how much water the soil holds and where the water would be. And that is very good for farmers and agriculturalists because they know whether it's in a floodplain or whether that area floods and how much soil they can depend to be, or how much water they can depend to be in the soil for crops and farming. So after that, we're first going to determine the color of this soil. So I'm going to take it out of this bag. I'm going to look at it. So you might just say, how do you determine brown to very dark brown and black? Well, brown is going to be more of a orangish color, more almost to a red, but not to the red soil that you would see in the southwest United States. So actually, you're going to identify this as very dark brown. And one reason I know this is that Missouri soil is very, very typical. So a lot of the top soil, that's the soil in the top half of the soil horizons, is going to match wherever you go throughout northeast Missouri, north of the Missouri River. So since I know where I found this and I've textured soil in this area before, I know it's going to be very dark brown because that's the typical soil. So after I do the color, I'm also going to determine the structure. So it can either be granular, and it would be very small pieces of soil like are falling off here, but also there's blocky soil, so they'd come off in blocks like are attached to the root. And there's prismatic, so they would fall off in actual like sheets of soil. And as soon as you would put your trowel into the horizon and pull out, a sheet of soil would actually fall out, and that's how you know it's prismatic. And fun fact from the Mr. Robert Calvin, once you go prismatic, you never go back. Because that's if you find a prismatic structure in a soil, most likely, according to soil scientists, you're never going to go back to another structure type. So determining the structure of this soil, you actually like to see how it falls off the root. So when just pulling it out, it looks very granular, but that's because it already fell off the root and the blockiness of that soil was already crushed. So if you look how it falls off the roots here, it's very blocky. There's blocks of soil. And so I wouldn't call this granular. If I was judging this as a soil scientist and in my FFA contest, I would call it blocky, and that's another very typical aspect of Missouri topsoil. So after color and structure, you're going to go to texture, and this is the fun part of soil identification. So texture, you're going to take your soil sample, about a handful enough that you can make a ball, and usually you're going to want less roots and grass, and you're going to want it fully soil. So you're going to take this and you're going to try and make a ball out of it. Usually it's not going to be wet enough to keep and form a ball, so that's why I have my handy dandy Troy Fafay spray bottle right here. So you're going to take your spray bottle and go one or two squirts of water to get it enough that it'll stick together. But with the water, you don't want it to be enough that it's seeping out of the soil, because then it could deceive your texture, and then you would lead to other failures otherwise in the contest. So once you make your texture ball, you're going to make it a ball, and you can actually start to tell what type of texture soil it's going to be. And those can be, soil consists of silt, clay, and sand, and loam, which is equal parts of silt, clay, and sand. So you can tell what type of sand or what type of texture it's going to be by the stickiness of the soil to your hands. Because if it's more sticky, it's going to have a heavier clay content, and so in Missouri topsoil, clay is not very common. You're going to find clay in the lower levels of the soil, so that would be around 70 to 80 inches deep into soils is usually when you find that heavy clay content. So a typical Missouri topsoil is going to be a loam silt loam, so that's going to be very soft, easy. However, it's not going to be so sandy that you can't keep it in a ball. So if you can keep a sand in the ball and toss it and catch it, you're going to know it's going to be a loam silt loam or higher. Because if it's below a loam silt loam and it's a sandy or sandy loam, you're not going to be able to keep it in the ball, and then you're not going to be able to texture it like I'm doing today. So the first step that I learned how to texture once you get it in the ball is you take your thumb and you push it down into the soil, and you see the cracks of all the soil. And if there's not a lot of cracks, it's going to be very heavy in clay, but if there's more cracks, there's not a lot of clay content in there, so it's going to be more loam. So after you do that, you're going to then go to riveting factor of that, and if it can ribbon, which means, so I push my thumb and pointer finger in the soil and push to see how much soil can stick together, keeping it as thin as possible. If it ribbons a lot, it's going to be heavier in clay content again. So after doing the thumb test and the ribbon test, I can automatically know that this is loam silt loam. And after texturing soil for a while, you're going to be able to tell how it feels in your hand. Texture is very important to how agriculturalists plant their crops. Because if you have a very heavy soil in clay, you're not going to be able to penetrate the roots of the soil, and that's not going to be it's not going to grow very good. So that's why in Missouri and in a lot of agriculturally based places, your texture is going to be more loam silt loam or lower, and that's how you can always have good agriculture products in those places. Thank you.